single scroll could rewrite the entire history of magic. In the silent depths of the Grand Athenaeum, a young archivist named Elara gently unrolls a seemingly blank parchment. Her unique gift allows her to see the faintest echoes of ancient magic, and she feels a powerful energy sleeping within this fragile artifact. She knows this scroll holds the key to a forgotten era of spellcraft, a visual map of how magic truly evolved. But awakening its power is a dangerous act. It will alert a secretive order who believes such knowledge is too dangerous to be known. Elara stands at a crossroads where every discovery is shadowed by peril. By the end of this journey, you will witness the complete visual history of magic, reclaimed from the ashes of time. What ancient truths were so powerful they had to be buried, and what happens when one person dares to uncover them? Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? What forgotten story do you think is waiting to be found? A faint, golden light began to pulse beneath Elara's fingertips. She poured a sliver of her own energy into the parchment, a quiet whisper of power. The air in the archive chamber shimmered, and suddenly, the scroll erupted. Forgotten sigils blazed into existence, no longer flat ink, but three-dimensional shapes of pure light. They swirled around her, projecting a complex web of ley lines and ancient spell circles that filled the room with a soft, ethereal hum. This was not just a drawing. It was a living map of magic's very roots, but the beautiful display came with an immediate cost. That surge of old power, however small, was a beacon. Far away, in a secluded citadel, a crystal orb flickered to life. The Conservators had felt it. An agent was already being dispatched to the Grand Athenaeum to locate the source of this forbidden resonance. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Protocol demanded she report the activation immediately, but doing so would mean handing the scroll over to the very order that believed such knowledge was a threat to be locked away. She looked at the glowing map, at the history shimmering in the air, and made her choice. With a swift, decisive motion, she cut the flow of her energy. The brilliant projection vanished, the sigils fading back into inert parchment. She carefully re-rolled the scroll and concealed it within her robes. This was her secret to keep, her path to walk alone. In that single act of concealment, she crossed a line. She was no longer just an archivist. She was now an unsanctioned practitioner, her very position hanging by a thread. As she stared at the now empty space where the map had glowed, one image remained burned into her vision. A single, vibrant ley line, pulsing with urgent light, seemed to point like an arrow toward a distant, forgotten ruin. The ruins of Ethelgarde rose from the jungle floor, like the broken bones of a forgotten giant. Elara pushed aside thick vines, her path illuminated only by the faint, persistent glow of the ley line only she could see. It led her directly to a circle of 5 weathered monoliths, each one carved with intricate symbols representing earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. The map had guided her here, but the test was only beginning. These were not simple carvings. They were elemental puzzles, and the air hummed with a silent, waiting energy. To open the way forward, she would have to make the stones sing in harmony. She began with earth, placing her palm on the cold, mossy stone. The puzzle was one of balance, not force. She had to channel just enough energy to to awaken the dormant moss, encouraging it to trace the symbol's grooves without shattering the ancient rock. Next was air, where she had to whisper a specific sequence of sounds into a series of holes, creating a chord that resonated with the stone's frequency. Fire required her to summon a single, steady flame to heat a hidden crystal vein until it glowed. Water asked her to coax morning dew from the air to fill a basin to a precise level. Each solution was a delicate negotiation with the world itself. When the final puzzle, that of spirit, accepted her own quiet humility, the 5 monoliths pulsed with a unified light. A low grinding sound echoed as a section of the central mound slid away, revealing a dark passage, but her success had an immediate consequence. From that darkness, a form of shimmering, translucent energy coalesced. It was the Guardian, a being of pure intent. It did not attack. Instead, it surrounded her, and a voice spoke directly into her mind. It was not a test of power, but of purpose. The spirit showed her visions of magic used as a weapon, of kingdoms leveled for pride, of knowledge twisted into domination. Then it presented her with the choice. She could take the knowledge sealed within and bear the immense responsibility of its safekeeping, or she could turn back now and leave it hidden for all time. The weight of that decision was crushing. Elara did not plead or argue her strength. She opened her own memories to the spirit, showing it her years of quiet preservation in the archives, her reverence for forgotten texts, her deep-seated belief that magic was a story that deserved to be remembered, not a weapon to be controlled. She wanted to preserve its history, not exploit its power. The Guardian, sensing the truth in her soul, slowly receded, and the path ahead was clear. Inside the hidden chamber, resting on a simple stone pedestal, was a large, perfectly clear crystal. As she approached, it flared to life, and a breathtaking vision filled her mind. She saw ancient communities working in concert with the land, their magic a gentle, weaving dance with natural forces. They built not with force, but with cooperation, their spells a form of shared language with the world. This primal magic was a stark, beautiful contrast to the competitive, individualistic spellcraft of her own era, but the vision's intensity was a flare in the magical spectrum. The crystal's light did not fade. It pulsed outward, a brilliant beacon that shone through the ruins and into the sky. And in that moment, Elara felt a cold, sharp presence on the edge of her awareness. The Conservator agent was close, and the light had just drawn them a map straight to her. The air in the chamber grew cold. Elara did not need to turn around to know who stood in the entrance. Kalin, a Conservator agent, moved with a silence that was more unnerving than any sound. His gaze was fixed on the glowing crystal in her hands, his expression a mask of grim duty. "You have taken something that does not belong to you, archivist," he said, his voice calm and utterly devoid of warmth. "The Order must secure this artifact." Elara's mind raced. Direct confrontation was impossible. His training far surpassed her own, but the crystal's vision had gifted her more than just history. It had shown her a different way to wield magic. As Kalin took a step forward, she didn't summon a shield or a bolt of force. Instead, she focused on the memory of the ancient weavers, their magic a gentle collaboration with the world. She reached out with a sliver of intent, not to command the stone around her, but to ask it for a favor, a simple misdirection. The air shimmered. With a soft whisper of power, she crafted an illusion of the chamber's ceiling groaning, of dust and stone beginning to rain down. It was a fragile, fleeting thing, but it was enough. Kalin's instincts, honed for survival, made him flinch and glance upward, buying her a single, precious second. She darted past him, the crystal clutched tightly to her chest, and vanished into the labyrinth of ruins. He was not fooled for long. The moment the illusion faded, Kalin's eyes narrowed not with anger, but with a spark of reluctant respect. The move was clever, subtle, and utterly unlike the blunt force the Conservators expected from rogue practitioners. His duty compelled him to pursue, but a part of him now saw Elara not just as a thief, but as a genuine mystery. She was a fugitive, running from the very institution she had dedicated her life to. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, and every safe path was now closed to her. She could trust no one. Her only allies were the whispers of a dead civilization and a crystal that pulsed with secrets. It was then she remembered a fragment from the vision, a mention of others like her, individuals who could see the echoes of magic. They were called echo seers. Finding them was no longer a scholarly curiosity. It was her only hope. To understand the full scope of the task she had accepted, she needed guidance. Losing the crystal would mean the map to magic's true history would be lost forever, locked away in a vault. Being caught would mean a silent, permanent cell, her mind severed from the magical currents she loved. The crystal warmed in her hands, its light shifting from a steady glow to a soft, rhythmic pulse. It was no longer just a repository of knowledge. It was a compass. The light coalesced, pointing insistently away from the dense jungle, toward a new direction, a faint, salty tang on the air hinting at a secluded coast. The rhythmic pulse of the crystal led Elara to a coastline where the sea met the sky in a soft gray haze. The fishing village of Maris clung to the cliffs, a collection of salt-weathered huts, smelling of brine and old nets. Here, she found Morwena. The old woman was mending a net with gnarled fingers, her eyes the color of a stormy sea, and she looked up as if she had been expecting Elara all along. "You carry the old song in your bones, child," she said, her voice a rasp like waves on shingle. I felt its echo on the tide. Morwena was an echo seer, but her magic was not locked in parchment or crystal. She took Elara to the shore at dusk and knelt where the water met the sand. With a gentle pass of her hand over a tidal pool, she awakened its surface. The water did not freeze. It became a living canvas, swirling with intricate patterns of light that mapped the underwater currents, the shifting sands, and the coming weather. This was her spellcraft, a daily, visual ritual passed down through generations of sea witches. She used these water-scried maps to guide the village fishermen to safe waters and to weave subtle magics that gently turned storm surges away from the vulnerable shore. Her power was a conversation with the ocean itself, a perfect example of how spellcraft had evolved not in isolation, but in deep symbiosis with a community and its environment. Elara watched humbled. Her own gift had always felt like a solitary secret, but Morwena's was a public service, a quiet, vital thread in the fabric of the village. She saw that true magic was not about personal strength, but about harmonious connection. Trusting this wisdom, Elara made a choice. She showed Morwena the crystal, sharing the visions of the ancient weavers and the living map from the scroll. The old woman's eyes widened, not with greed, but with a profound, sad recognition. "We have forgotten so much," she whispered, tracing the crystal's light. "This is the heart song we have lost." Their collaboration was a dangerous beacon. Kalin arrived in Maris 2 days later, his presence as subtle and chilling as a sudden fog. He moved through the village with a quiet intensity, questioning the fishermen, asking if they had seen a stranger, a young woman from the Grand Athenaeum. The risk of exposure now threatened not just Elara, but every person in Maris. The Conservators viewed any unsanctioned magic as a contagion to be purged, and a whole community practicing ancient, environmental rites would be seen as a grave threat. Elara and Morwena were forced to conceal their work, meeting in the pre-dawn hours in a sea cave, accessible only at low tide, the sound of the ocean masking their whispers. Under Morwena's guidance, Elara began to learn control. She learned to still the frantic energy of her own fear, to listen for the magical currents as Morwena listened to the sea. She practiced not by forcing her will upon the world, but by aligning her intent with its natural flow. Her earlier misdirection in the ruins now refined into a true skill. One evening, as the village lanterns flickered to life and Kalin's silhouette was seen questioning a net mender on the distant dock, Morwena placed a hand on Elara's shoulder. "The crystal shows you the path, but you cannot walk it all on dry land," she said, her gaze turning toward the endless, dark water. "The next key does not lie in any archive you can reach by foot. To understand the next stage of magic's evolution, you must seek the Library of Echoes, a place that sank beneath the waves ages ago. The water was a cold, crushing blackness until Morwena's magic wrapped around them. A sphere of shimmering air descended, pushing back the ocean and revealing a path downward into the abyss. Guided by the crystal's shared vision, they drifted toward a colossal structure of pale, algae-crusted stone, the Library of Echoes. Its grand arches and silent halls stood preserved in the deep, a ghost of a civilization that had chosen the sea as its final tomb. Inside, the water was unnaturally still. Elara ran her fingers over the walls, feeling not carved stone, but something far more profound. The entire library was a living manuscript. Intricate schools of phosphorescent fish swam in precise, hypnotic patterns, their movements illustrating the flow of ancient tides and the creation of the first aquatic spells. Luminous jellyfish pulsed with complex rhythms, demonstrating the principles of pressure and current manipulation. This was not a place of written words, but of living, breathing instruction. Navigating its halls was a trial in itself. Invisible currents, sharp as blades, threatened to slice their protective bubble. Morwena, her hands trembling with strain, guided them through this liquid maze, her every breath a testament to her fading strength. Their goal was a central chamber, where a single, flawless pearl rested on a pedestal of coral, glowing with a soft, internal light. But as Elara reached for it, the ancient library reacted to the presence of the surface crystal. The corridor behind them groaned, and a massive stone block began to slide from the ceiling, destined to crush them and seal the chamber forever. In that heartbeat of terror, a memory from the crystal's vision flashed in Elara's mind, a protective ward used by the original builders, a weave of force meant not to destroy, but to preserve. She didn't have time to think, only to act. Thrusting her hands outward, she channeled her will, not as a blunt shield, but as a gentle, unyielding net of energy. The ward flared to life, catching the colossal stone and holding it suspended, its carved surface inches from their faces. The effort left her gasping, but the way was clear. She seized the luminescent pearl. The moment her skin touched its cool surface, a torrent of knowledge flooded her mind. She saw the library's final days not as a tragedy, but as a deliberate act. Its keepers, facing a rising tide of magical purgers who sought to simplify and control all spellcraft, had chosen to sink their entire repository into the sea, hiding the complexity of water magic where only the most worthy could ever find it. This was not the first time knowledge had been buried to save it from destruction. As the pearl's light dimmed, Morwena slumped against the wall, her energy spent. The return to the surface was a desperate, slow ascent. When their air bubble finally broke into the blinding light of day, the relief was short-lived. There, cutting through the morning mist on the horizon, was a sleek, unmistakable vessel Kalin's ship, and standing at its prow, beside the agent, was a new figure whose very posture spoke of a chilling, focused power. The Conservators were no longer just chasing a thief. They had brought a hunter. The ocean's whispers had taught her a new language. In the quiet of the sea cave, with the glowing pearl and the clear crystal pulsing in harmony before her, Elara wove their combined knowledge into something tangible. She did not write on parchment. Instead, she channeled the memory of the living library, using threads of pure light to sketch a complex, shimmering chart of the ocean's hidden pathways. It showed the warm currents that promised safe passage, and the treacherous, cold underflows that could pull a ship apart. Under the cover of night, she sent these anonymous, magical charts, drifting on the wind, where they settled like gentle fireflies onto the decks of merchant vessels and fishing boats in nearby shipping lanes. Within days, stories began to circulate in every port. Sailors spoke of a mysterious blessing, of impossible navigational luck that saved them from storms and reefs. They toasted their unknown benefactor, a ghost they called the Tide Weaver. This public miracle, however, was a direct challenge to the established order. The Conservators could not ignore such a blatant, and worse, benevolent, use of unsanctioned power. From their perspective, it was chaos, a dangerous precedent that could inspire others to break their strict codes. Kalin found her on a windswept bluff, overlooking the sea, his arrival silent and inevitable. The time for subtle pursuit was over. "Elara of the Grand Athenaeum," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his office. "Your actions, however well-intentioned, cannot be permitted. You will surrender the artifacts and submit to the judgment of the Conservators. This is your only path to leniency. Refuse, and by sunrise, you will be declared an enemy of the state, with every bounty hunter and loyal mage authorized to bring you in." Elara did not flinch. "The knowledge does not belong to you," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "It does not belong to any single order. The history of magic belongs to everyone. It is a story that was meant to be shared, not locked away in fear." Her refusal was not just a personal stand, it was a declaration of principle. Word of her defiance spread like wildfire through secret channels. To a growing, silent network of practitioners who felt constrained by the Conservators' rigid doctrines, her words were a spark. She was no longer just a fugitive. She had become a symbol, the tide weaver who dared to say no. And with that new status came a far greater danger. The Conservators now saw her not as a misguided archivist, but as the leader of a nascent rebellion. The target on her back was no longer just Kalin's to track. It was visible to the entire apparatus of the state. As the weight of this new reality settled upon her, the crystal and the pearl, resting side by side in her satchel, began to hum with a new, urgent energy. Their soft, guiding light shifted, merging into a single, brilliant beam that pointed away from the coast, its focus sharp and unwavering. It aimed directly for the jagged, snow-capped peaks of a volatile mountain range, where the air was thin and the earth itself was known to tremble. The Dragon's Breath Mountains tore at the sky with jagged teeth of stone. Elara and Morwena climbed through thin, biting air, guided by the unwavering beam from the artifacts. They found the monastery not built upon the peaks, but woven into them, its open arches inviting the eternal wind. Here, the monks were echo-seers of a different kind. They did not write their histories, they sang them. An elder monk, his robes fluttering like restless wings, demonstrated by lifting a hand. He did not speak, but the wind coiling around his fingers began to whisper, forming distinct, audible patterns that carried the story of the monastery's founding. This was spellcraft as sound, a living archive preserved in the very breath of the world. The monks showed Elara how to listen, how to feel the subtle shifts in pressure and tone that differentiated a weather report from an epic poem. It was a language of vibrations, adding a profound auditory layer to her visual understanding of magic's evolution. This fragile harmony was shattered when the Conservators' pursuit reached the peaks. Their attempts to scry for Elara using forceful, disruptive magic agitated the mountain's delicate elemental balance. The skies, once a canvas of whispered stories, darkened into a furious, magical storm. Thunder that sounded like breaking stone echoed through the passes, and lightning forks targeted the monastery's open towers, threatening to shatter the delicate sonic archives held within. The elder monk turned to Elara, his face etched with a calm despair. "The old ways are the only way to answer this," he said. "You must lead the concordance." Elara understood. This was not a task for one person. She gathered the monks in the central courtyard, the crystal and pearl placed before her. She did not try to dominate the storm. Instead, she became its conductor, using the crystal's visual map to understand the storm's chaotic structure and the pearl's knowledge of fluid dynamics. She wove a framework of intent. The monks provided the chorus, their combined voices and wind magic singing a counter melody to the tempest's rage, a song of stillness and calm. The effort demanded perfect harmony. A single note of fear, a moment of dissonance, and the entire ritual would collapse, leaving them defenseless. Below, watching from a precarious ledge, Kalin witnessed the impossible. He saw the raw, untamable fury of the storm begin to slow, its violent winds unraveling into gentle breezes under the guidance of this collaborative magic. It was not the suppression of power he had been taught, but a beautiful, intricate negotiation. For the first time, the iron certainty of his duty cracked. He had been sent to capture a rogue, but he was watching a healer. As the last whisper of the storm faded, the elder monk approached Elara. He presented her with a small, silver chime. He struck it once, and instead of a simple tone, it released the captured song of the recently calmed storm, a complex, beautiful melody of power and peace. "This is the voice of the mountain's memory," he said, "the third key to your map." With the chime resting beside the crystal and pearl, the three artifacts began to resonate, their combined light now pointing not to a new location, but inward, suggesting that the final piece of the puzzle was not a place, but a person. Morwena's breathing was a shallow, rasping rhythm in the thin mountain air. She leaned heavily on her staff, her face pale with exhaustion. The journey and the constant strain of powerful magic had taken their toll. As they descended to the foothills, where the air grew thick and hot, she stopped Elara with a frail but firm hand. "I cannot go on, child, not into the deep desert. You must travel to the oasis alone." Her plan was a desperate gambit. She would remain behind, using the last of her strength to weave false trails and water echoes, drawing the Conservators away from Elara's true path. It was a sacrifice, turning herself into a decoy. Elara's heart twisted with a sharp, cold guilt, leaving her felt like a betrayal, an abandonment of the one person who had believed in her. How could she possibly succeed without Morwena's wisdom and steadying presence? The fear was a hollow ache in her chest, colder than any mountain peak. But looking into the old woman's determined eyes, she saw the hard truth. This was the only way. "I will not let your sacrifice be in vain," Elara vowed, her voice thick with emotion. "I will find the next key for both of us." She turned and walked into the vast, sun-scorched expanse, utterly alone for the first time. Her only companions were the three artifacts, whose combined light now formed a single, unwavering beacon pointing deep into the dunes. Back at the mountain's edge, Morwena's deception worked too well. She created such a compelling magical signature that the Conservators descended upon her location in force. She did not resist as Kalin, and the new, more powerful hunter took her into custody. Her capture was quiet and efficient. She was now a prisoner, a tangible piece of leverage to be used against the fugitive she had sworn to protect. The news of Morwena's capture traveled through the secret networks, a chilling whisper that eventually reached Elara as she trudged through the endless sea of sand. The message was clear. The Conservators knew she would not let her mentor suffer. They were counting on her loyalty to draw her out. The pressure was immense, a weight heavier than the desert sun. Her path was now a treacherous line between completing her mission and saving her friend. With a dry throat and a determined spirit, she pressed onward, following the artifact's glow until a shimmering vision appeared on the horizon. A lush, impossible oasis that did not waver like a mirage, but pulsed with a very real, very potent magic. The Oasis of Echoes was a living tapestry woven from sand and light. Elara stepped into its cool shade, and the ground beneath her feet shifted. Entire histories were not carved in stone here, but painted on a canvas of countless grains. The sand scribes moved with slow, deliberate grace, their fingers tracing patterns that made the desert floor bloom with images of ancient riverbeds, mountain formations, and the first rituals of earth magic. This was a library of perpetual motion, where stories were written by the wind and rewritten by the next keeper. But the beautiful murals were fading at their edges, the vibrant colors dimming to a dull gray. An elder scribe named Jabir explained their quiet crisis. The deep, hidden aquifer that fed the oasis and powered their delicate art was being stolen. A powerful siphoning spell, cast by the Conservators, was pulling the water away to fuel the fountains and industry of their distant citadel. The Sand Scribe's magic, a gentle collaboration with the earth, was no match for such a forceful, engineered theft. Their history was literally drying up and blowing away. Elara stood at a crossroads more painful than any before. Every instinct screamed for her to take the fourth artifact and run, to find Morwena before it was too late. But how could she walk away from a people watching their very soul evaporate? To preserve one history by letting another vanish felt like a betrayal of everything she had learned. She looked at the 3 artifacts in her satchel, their light pulsing in sync with her own heartbeat, and made her choice. She would help. Delving into the crystal's vast memories, she searched for a solution, not of force, but of correction. She found it, a geomantic ritual used by the ancient builders to heal fractured ley lines. It required perfect alignment with the deep earth, a subtle redirection of flow. With Jabier and the other scribes forming a circle of intent around her, Elara began the spell. She did not attack the Conservator's siphon. Instead, she gently persuaded the water, reminding it of its ancient path, of the roots it was meant to feed, and the stories it was meant to preserve. It was a whisper against a shout, a single thread of truth woven into a rope of coercion. Deep underground, the magical current hesitated, then shifted. With a deep, groaning shudder that vibrated up through the sand, the water returned. A surge of vibrant color exploded through the oasis murals, the grains of sand dancing with renewed energy. The act was a complete success, but it was also a declaration of war. She had not just reclaimed water, she had severed a vital resource for the Conservator's city. The moment the flow was restored, alarms would have blazed to life in their citadel. She was no longer a fugitive to be captured. She was a strategic threat to be eliminated. Jabier, his eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow for the danger she had invited, presented her with a small, obsidian vial. Inside swirled the sands of time. When she poured a single grain into her palm, it did not blow away. Instead, it bloomed into a miniature, 3-dimensional vision of a continent forming, of volcanoes birthing new land, of the deep, slow magic of the planet itself. This was the history of terrestrial magic, the 4th key. Holding it, she finally understood the full map. The crystal held the foundation, the pearl held the flow, the chime held the voice, and now the sand held the body. The artifacts were not just keys, they were the elemental layers of Spellcraft itself, and their unified light now pointed her toward one final, terrifying destination, the heart of the Conservator's power. The oasis was silent, holding its breath in the cool shade. Kalin stepped from between the swaying palms, his approach no longer a predator's stalk, but the weary tread of a man caught between 2 truths. He did not draw a weapon. Instead, he opened his hand, revealing not a spell, but a small, shimmering shard of memory crystal. "I was ordered to secure this from the archives," he said, his voice low. "It details energy consumption in the Citadel. The leader's private chambers are drawing more power than our entire scrying network. He is not protecting knowledge, Elara. He is consuming it." The evidence hung in the air, more dangerous than any blade. The Conservators were not guardians, they were hoarders, and their leader was using the very magic they forbade others to touch, amassing a personal power that could dwarf any in history. In that moment, the hunter and the hunted faced not each other, but a common enemy. A fragile, silent agreement passed between them, woven from a shared betrayal and a desperate need for the truth. Kalin looked at the 4 artifacts glowing in Elara's satchel, then back at her face, seeing not a criminal, but the only person who might prevent a catastrophe. My oath was to protect the balance of magic, not one man's greed, he said, the words tasting like ash. To arrest you now would be to deliver these artifacts directly into his hands. His decision was a quiet earthquake, shattering the foundation of his life. By choosing to help her, he became a traitor, an outlaw in the eyes of the only family he had ever known. His knowledge was now their greatest weapon. He revealed the Citadel's layout, the shift changes of the guards, and the location of the high-security vault, known as the Athenaeum, where Morwena was being held, and where the Conservators stored their most dangerous acquisitions, including the rumored 5th and final artifact. The risks were absolute. If they were caught, their fates would be worse than imprisonment. They would be erased, their minds wiped clean of every memory of magic, leaving them as hollow shells. But with Kalin's inside knowledge, a reckless plan began to form, a rescue mission that would also be a final reclamation. They would not just break into the heart of their enemy's power, they would steal back the last piece of the map from under the nose of the man who sought to own it all. The Conservator's citadel was a fortress of silent, polished obsidian, its corridors humming with the restrained power of countless wards. Kalin moved like a ghost, his insider knowledge guiding them past patrols with an unnerving precision. Elara's gift, however, was their true key. She saw the security not as physical barriers, but as a luminous web of crimson light, a tapestry of magical tripwires and suppression fields that was invisible to anyone else. She navigated this deadly lattice by feel, finding the subtle gaps and dormant threads, leading them deep into the restricted archives. The air grew cold and still, the magic here not just guarded, but imprisoned. They found Morwena in a cell that deadened all sound and sensation, her form dim and flickering like a guttering candle. But relief at finding her alive was swiftly overshadowed by what rested on a pedestal in the center of the vault. It was the core lens, a disk of what seemed like solidified light, and the moment they entered, the 4 artifacts in Elara's satchel flared with such intensity they nearly blinded her. The lens was the final piece, the keystone designed to unite them all. As Elara reached for it, a calm, resonant voice filled the chamber. "I must thank you for your exceptional service." Archmage Valerius stood in the doorway, his expression one of paternal pride. "You have gathered the pieces with an efficiency my own agents could never match. Every step, from the jungle ruins to the desert oasis, was a test I orchestrated. Your rebellion was merely a convenient tool for my collection. The realization was a physical blow." They had not been outsmarting their pursuers. They had been performing in a play written by their enemy, all to deliver the complete map directly into his hand. Elara's hands tightened around the satchel. She looked from Valerius's smug certainty to Morwena's fading light in the cell, to Kalin's face, etched with the horror of his own unwitting complicity. She would not be his delivery service. "No," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "This knowledge does not belong to you." Valerius's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. "Then I will simply take it." He did not gesture or chant. The air in the archive simply hardened, a crushing wave of pure force, meant to pin them where they stood and strip the artifacts from their grasp. Kalin reacted instantly, throwing up a defensive shield that buckled under the onslaught, but held for a critical second. Spells of containment and disintegration shattered against the archive walls, sending showers of enchanted stone and torn parchment flying. The citadel itself became their battleground, its very stability threatening to come apart around them. Elara clutched the artifacts, their combined power a roaring torrent in her veins, but she knew she could not match Valerius in a contest of raw strength. He had spent a lifetime hoarding power, while she had spent hers learning its history. As another volley of destructive energy shattered Kalin's latest defense, the truth crystallized in her mind. Force was his language, his entire philosophy. To fight him on those terms was to lose. The only way to win was not to overpower him, but to show him, and everyone else, what he truly was. She had to use the map not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Elara did not raise the artifacts as weapons. She opened them to the world. A brilliant, silent shockwave of pure information erupted from the core lens, amplified by the crystal, the pearl, the chime, and the sand. It was not an attack, but an unveiling. A colossal, shimmering tapestry of light unfolded over the entire citadel, painting the night sky with the true history of magic. Everyone, from the highest tower to the lowest street, could see it. They saw the ancient weavers cooperating with the land, the sea witches guiding their villages, the wind singers preserving their stories. They saw magic as a gift of connection, a shared language for nurturing the world. And then the tapestry showed the turning point, the rise of the Conservators, not as protectors, but as controllers who systematically rewrote that history, burying the old ways and branding them as dangerous to consolidate their own power. A collective gasp rippled through the city. The foundation of their reality was cracking. Junior mages stared in horrified disbelief, their loyalty shattered by the visual proof of the lies they had been taught. The public, who had always viewed magic with a mixture of awe and fear, now saw it as a stolen inheritance. Archmage Valerius screamed a command, hurling a lance of annihilating energy at the heart of the projection. But his spell unraveled before it could strike. The truth it was trying to destroy was a poison to his power, which was built entirely upon that falsehood. The more he fought the vision, the weaker his magic became, his own energy rejecting the lie he had embodied for so long. Elara, Kalin, and a newly freed Morwena stood together, their hands linked. They did not cast a single offensive spell. Instead, they poured every ounce of their will into sustaining the projection, weaving a protective shield around the tapestry of light. They were not warriors in that moment. They were teachers, librarians, and guardians, fighting with revelation instead of force. The Conservators' authority was dissolving in the radiant truth, shining above their city. Valerius, his face a mask of frantic rage, saw his entire empire crumbling into dust. In a final, desperate act, he abandoned all subtlety and lunged directly for the core lens, his fingers outstretched to seize the source of this catastrophe. But the 5 artifacts, now functioning as one complete system, recognized the hostile intent. As his hand touched the lens, the unified magic reacted not with violence, but with consequence. A blinding feedback loop of pure historical truth erupted, a torrent of every suppressed story and every act of hoarding. The light did not burn him, it consumed him, pulling him into the very tapestry he had tried to own. Archmage Valerius did not vanish in a flash of light. He collapsed inward, his body racked by the silent, brutal torrent of 10,000 years. The feedback loop forced him to live every moment of the history he had tried to own. He felt the gentle warmth of the first village weavers, the profound trust between the sea witches and their ocean, the soaring freedom of the wind singers' harmonies. And then he felt the sharp, cold sting of the first lie told to control that power, the first scroll burned, the first practitioner silenced by the order he now led. He experienced not just the facts, but the emotional weight of every loss, every act of beauty, and every betrayal. It was an empathy of devastating scale. When the light finally receded, Valerius was on his knees, a hollowed-out man. His magical power, once a crushing tide, was now a quiet, shallow pool. The arrogance in his eyes was gone, replaced by a haunted, profound remorse. "I only sought to prevent chaos," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I never saw the beauty we were erasing." His neutralization created a power vacuum that tore the Conservators apart. Hardliners, their world, views shattered but their instincts for control intact, shouted for a renewed purge, for seizing the artifacts and re-establishing order through force. But a larger faction, especially the younger mages who had seen the tapestry, refused. They had witnessed their own legacy and could not unsee it. The citadel echoed with the sounds of a crumbling empire, shouted arguments, the clatter of abandoned regalia, the slam of doors as members resigned in disgust. In the midst of this turmoil, Elara made her final, decisive move. She did not claim the artifacts as a victor's prize. Instead, she carried the 5 unified pieces into the center of the fractured crowd and laid them down as a gift. "This map does not belong to any one person or faction," she declared, her voice carrying through the hall. "It belongs to the story itself. To protect it, we must form a new council, one with voices from every tradition we almost lost." She gestured to Morwena, to Kalin, to a sand scribe who had journeyed from the Oasis, and even to a young, uncertain mage who had just torn the Conservator insignia from his robe. The old order, built on fear and exclusion, was finished, but building a new one from its ashes was a fragile, monumental task. Trust was a scarce resource, and old habits of command died hard. The stakes were no longer about a single fugitive or a set of artifacts, but about the very soul of magic's future. Would they simply create a new Conservators under a different name, or could they truly forge something collaborative and open? In the Citadel's great hall, cleared of debris and filled with an uneasy mix of former enemies and new allies, the first meeting of this new council began. The completed map of Spellcraft glowed at its center, no longer a secret to be guarded, but a foundation to be built upon. The first public library of magic opened its doors not with a grand ceremony, but with a quiet, collective gasp. Where once there had been only silent, restricted archives, now stood a great hall, illuminated by the living map itself. Elara watched as a young girl, no older than 10, reached out to touch a projected image of a water-weaving ritual. The light did not vanish or reprimand her, it simply brightened, flowing around her small fingers as if in greeting. This was the new Genesis. Across the continent, schools began to teach not just rigid spell formulas, but the visual, tactile history of where those spells came from. Students learned fire making not by rote, but by seeing the first sparks of cooperation between ancient mages and volcanic ley lines. The result was a renaissance of innovation that no one could have predicted. Earth mages collaborated with wind singers to create new, self-sustaining agricultural systems. Healers incorporated the gentle, flowing patterns of the sea witches into their arts, mending bones and spirits with a softer, more profound touch. It was magic rediscovering its own communal heart. This profound shift, however, was not without its friction. Traditionalists who had built their entire identities upon the old, exclusive ways of the Conservators saw this openness as a dilution of power, a dangerous slide into chaos. Disputes flared in council meetings, not with spells, but with sharp words and entrenched fear. A master of elemental force might argue that sharing the deep secrets of storm, calling with anyone who walked in off the street, was irresponsible folly. Elara found herself navigating these conflicts with a diplomat's patience, reminding everyone that hoarding knowledge had nearly cost them everything. Yet, as the council slowly found its footing, she felt a familiar pull, the same quiet instinct that had first led her to the blank scroll in the Grand Athenaeum. One evening, looking at the now stable map that was guiding a new generation, she realized her most vital work was complete. The world did not need another political leader. It needed a witness, a gatherer of stories still being written. She decided to step back from her council seat, to once again become a traveling archivist, but this time with the freedom to document the new magic blooming from the seeds they had planted. The stakes for this new society remained immense. Its brighter future was a delicate ecosystem, requiring constant care to ensure it did not grow rigid or exclusive again. But that would be a task for others to shepherd. Packing her satchel, Elara felt the artifacts hum softly, already sensing a new thread of magic evolving in a distant land where the northern lights danced with a peculiar, intelligent rhythm. The wind tugged at Elara's cloak as she stood on the high cliff, looking down at the valley below. A circle of young students laughed as they practiced a simple light spell, their hands weaving patterns in the air. The globes of soft light they created bobbed and danced, but it was the illumination on their own faces that held her attention, a radiant joy born not from personal power, but from shared discovery. This was the true tapestry she had helped weave. The grand map of Spellcraft's evolution was no longer a relic to be unearthed from a dusty archive. It was here, alive in the open air, growing with every new spell learned and every old story remembered. Her own journey felt complete, not because all problems were solved, but because the foundation was now strong enough for others to build upon. She had arrived at the Grand Athenaeum as a solitary archivist, her greatest ambition to preserve the past. She was leaving it as a catalyst, having helped return magic to its roots as a living, communal language. New challenges would always emerge, of course. Disagreements would flare, and some would always fear the very openness that made this new era so vibrant. But the core truth remained unshakable. Magic was no longer a walled garden for the few, but a vast visual and vibrant forest for all to explore and nurture. It would continue to evolve, not in secret, but in plain sight, for generations to come. you.